the engine that makes all this stuff work and possible. Your choice of paint is extremely important, so let's get you armed with the info you need to make some wise decisions, okay? First of all, we're going to answer the age-old question, tubes or pans? My first proper set of paints was a Dale Rowney Georgian half pan set, okay, a landscape set, and it served me well for, you know, for a while. At least so I thought, until I made the jump to tube paints, okay? Now, tube paints open up watercolour to you in a way you just don't experience with half pans. Sorry, but it's true, okay? First of all, it should be noted that using tube paints is much better for your brushes, as you don't spend half your time wearing down the bristles on your brushes, scrubbing away at little hard pans of paint in a desperate attempt to try and mix up proper washes. And think about it, you know, which is softer, the bristles of your brush or that hard pan of paint with a solid plastic edge around it? Yeah, it's not rocket science, is it? Tube paints will also give you the ability to mix up sort of great big sloppy washes of something dark and mysterious in a matter of just seconds, you know, rather than minutes. And you can also use the paint straight out the tube if you need a super dark or a highlight to add that finishing touch to your masterpiece, okay? Dare I say, you can also use paint out the tube to get some fantastic 3D relief textural effects in your work to add that extra zazzle, you know? Yes, you can do that in watercolour. It's not just a thing for acrylic artists, you can do it in watercolour as well. You do whatever you need to do to get the result you want. Yeah, you got to remember that. So, in my humble opinion, in the question of tubes versus pans, tubes most definitely come out on top, every time. One thing that does tend to make people opt for pans rather than tubes is because they don't want to be, you know, flushing away unused paint at the end of each session. Because paint's expensive, isn't it? So, simple solution to that is to make sure you get an airtight palette. I showed you one in the first video in this series. That way, all you really need to do is just to add a sponge to the mix, give it a spray, stick the lid on, and it'll keep your paints fresh indefinitely. Problem solved, okay? So, no more excuses now, go and get some tubes. Okay, next, artists versus student quality watercolours. A question every artist will ask at some point. Okay, in order to answer that, first of all, we need to just clarify that when I'm talking about student watercolours, I'm not talking about the crappy pan sets you get in the pound shop for kids. No, I'm talking about proper paints that you buy in an art supply shop. Yeah, the previous, avoid them like the plague. They're not proper watercolours, and if you buy a set of those, you're going to be putting yourself at a disadvantage before you even start, trust me. So I'm talking about proper paints that you buy from an art supply shop. For example, the Cockmit range from Winsor Newton, or the Aquafine range from Dale Rowney. They used to be the Georgian Rowney range, by the way, yeah? So get an idea where I'm coming from. That's what I started off on. I personally used student ranges for a good few years before I converted, and everything was fine. Yeah, but I do have to say that I did notice a marked difference when I did finally make the switch, being honest. The main one being that because there's so much more pigment in artist quality paints, you need much less paint to get the same intensity of colour. Okay, there's not as much binder and all that other stuff in there. And what that basically means is I actually think that artist quality watercolours could actually be more economical in the long run, because you just need so much less of it to get the same effect. Yeah? So if you're just starting out and want to run with student quality watercolours for a little while, that's fine. You know, don't let anybody tell you any different. You don't have to have artist quality. It just works a bit better if you do. Yeah? So what I would say, once you've established the colours that you want, your personal choice of colours, figure out which ones you use the most of, and then consider maybe switching those out for tubes or artist quality. It just means that you're going to be able to get the sort of intensity of wash that you want much quicker, which is going to save you time in the long run, and hopefully, you know, maybe save you a bit of cash as well. As I say, I haven't done the actual sums there, so I'm not quite sure if it does work out cheaper or not. So next we're going to talk about brands. I've tried and tested most of the brands available over the years with varying degrees of success, but over the last few years I've most definitely settled on Daniel Smith extra fine watercolours, and they're all I use now. Yeah, I have some Winsor Newton gouache colours as well that I chuck into the mix every now and again, but all my pure watercolours as such are Daniel Smith extra fine watercolours, and they are, in my opinion, the best watercolours on the market today, bar none. They're just fantastic. The colours have an intensity that is unrivaled, in my opinion, and they have colours in the range that no one else even gets close to. You know, you just can't find them anywhere else. And as a texture addict, the number of granulating colours in the Daniel Smith range is a particular plus for me, you know. But the main reason that I love these paints so much is the level of pigment in these colours is amazing. It means that, you know, a little goes a very long way, and the colours are really easy to activate as well. You know, you don't need to add a lot of water to get these paints moving, which is just fantastic. It just makes things so much easier. These paints make you paint better, you know, they really do. Right, one great little innovation that Daniel Smith have added into the mix as well is their dot tester cards, which is basically a handful of sheets of watercolour paper, a bit like this. Yeah, this is them. That's the idea, and they have a little dot of colour from each colour in the range added onto the paper, and you could just add a little bit of water and you can test the colour. Fantastic, you know, and it gives you a chance to try them out at minimal expense. Because paint's expensive, and you know, I think you get 4 or 5 sheets in here, something like that, and they're about £25, which isn't bad at all to test out 238 colours, is it? All the info for each colour is also included on the sheets as well, meaning you can decide which colours you want to move forward with, sort of safe in the knowledge that you've got all the facts, so to speak. Right, I'd also like to dispel the myth that they're super expensive. They're not. I actually worked out that in the UK at least, on a per mil basis, if you compare Daniel Smith, you know, some of the typical colours used for landscape are actually slightly cheaper when you compare them against Winsor Newton artist range, for example, which seems to be the sort of go-to range for most watercolour artists in the UK, and indeed in a lot of other countries as well. So, you know, they're about the same sort of price. The Daniel Smith tubes are actually a 15mm as well. Not a lot of people, you know, realise that. So you're getting a bit more paint for your buck, so to speak. So that's really all there is to say about Daniel Smith, except, you know, go get some, give them a go, and you'll see what I mean. You know, this is a great way of testing them out, and I kid you not, you'll see what I mean. They're just fantastic colours, you know. Just go get some, give them a shot. So one little piece of advice I would give you is that when you're picking your palette of colours, just pick a handful of colours to begin with. Yeah, you don't need any more than this. Spend some time with each of your colours, learning what they can do and what they can't do, and see how they mix and react with each other, and most importantly, learn their properties, which we'll talk about in a second. Your colours should basically be like your best friends, yeah? You should know everything about them. And I might also add here that your choice of colours is a personal one. Okay, so although there are a few colours that are standard for landscape, you know, you'll see them in every book. Don't be afraid to shake it up a bit and add your own, you know, because it's little things like that that will start to set your work apart from the masses. It will make your work look a bit unique and individual if you have personal colour choices thrown into the mix, rather than just following the masses, so to speak. Yeah? A number of the colours I use are not exactly what you would expect to see in a landscape painter's palette. They're a little bit different, but they work for me, you know, and they give my work that sort of little unique something. For those of you who want to know the colours I use, I've included a little sheet, there'll be a download link somewhere, and that'll give you the colours that I personally use. As I say, I'm not encouraging you to go out and buy those specific colours, because it's really not important what colours you use. The only important thing is that you know what your colours do and how they react with each other. How do you get that green? Does this granulate? And etc, etc. One very important point I should add here, however, is that although I have 20 or so colours in my palette, to call, I never use more than 5 or 6 colours maximum in any one painting. That's very, very important distinction to make. Yeah, that's why I said you only need a handful of colours. If there's one thing that will make a painting look disjointed and amateurish, it's the use of too many different colours in the same painting. If you keep your colour selection small and tight, it will ensure that your paintings remain harmonious. Yeah, and you can ensure this if you use a palette that has lots of mixing space, like the one I showed you in the first video in this series. That way you can get a little bit of the colour from one to drift into the other, and so on and so on. And this just helps things along a little bit more, because there's always a bit of that and a bit of that, and so on. I had someone ask me at a workshop once actually whether the colours would end up becoming muddy because of that. No is the short answer. You only really get muddy colours when you go back into drying washes and start messing about with stuff and trying to correct things. Yeah, so that's a good little tip for you there. As long as your paint's wet, your colours will remain vibrant and fresh. Okay, right, properties. You'll have heard a few terms being bandied about when it comes to paint, watercolour paint anyway, that may be a little bit confusing. So let's take some of that confusion away for you. Right, first one, granulating colours or granulation. This basically refers to when the pigments in the colour separate and disperse across the surface of the paper. Yeah, it's a bit like taking a load of paint and chucking it through a sieve. Is probably the only way I can really describe it to you. It's particularly noticeable on rough paper, and it's effective, when you use it in landscape painting. It's just really useful little thing to have in your armoury, so to speak. Right, so most manufacturers will include this information on the colour charts and on the tubes. However, if you're not sure whether a certain colour granulates or not, the easiest way to tell is to just add a bit of water to your paper, touch in a bit of pigment, and then rock it from side to side, like so. Okay, if the colour starts separating out and dispersing, then you've got your answer. It's a granulating colour. The more water you add, the more pronounced the effect will be as well. Yeah, so it's just a fantastic little thing to have. Granulating paints also separate when mixed with other colours as well. Okay, so this can be used to create some fantastic effects. You can have 2 different colours granulating at the same time. It's fantastic. A few commonly used granulating colours would be French ultramarine blue, cerulean blue, raw sienna, burnt sienna, burnt umber, Payne's grey. One of my favourite colours is a Daniel Smith colour called Bloodstone Genuine. It's a sort of warm purpley grey, and it granulates amazingly, and it's just useful for all sorts of things. Okay, right, next, opaque and transparent colours. What's the difference? Fairly self-explanatory, but while all watercolours are transparent when used with enough water, some pigments are naturally more opaque. Okay, so for example, yellow ochre or Naples yellow may be considered an opaque yellow, whereas aureolin would be classed as a transparent yellow. And a transparent colour basically lets the white of the paper or whatever you painted underneath it show through, while other pigments that are semi-opaque or opaque are a little bit denser, and they've got more ability to cover what's underneath them basically. One little additional note here would be that many of the student ranges and the lower quality watercolours are mixed with more binder and less pigment, so they'll appear a little bit more chalky and opaque. just as a factor to consider when you're making your choices as to which way to go with that. Now, paint colours can also sometimes lack vibrancy, so just be careful with their use. You know, if they're overused, it can kill a painting a little bit, so just be a little bit judicious in their use. Right, so next we have staining and non-staining colours. Now this is an important one to remember, especially when you're starting out, because a mark made using a staining colour is a great deal more difficult to remove than a mark made using a non-staining colour, especially if you're using a cotton rag paper like Arches or Saunders. Yeah, a staining pigment basically means exactly what it says. You know, once it's applied, it will sink quickly into the fibres of the paper, just making it difficult to remove. It effectively stains the paper, and in some cases it'll stain your palette and your brushes and your fingers and your clothes as well if you let it. Yeah, so that's generally why I tend to stay clear of staining colours where I can. One such colour that seems to be included in a lot of starter kits for some reason is a colour called sap green. Avoid it like the plague. It's a horrible, horrible colour. Not only is it a sickly green, but it's staining, super staining, you know, in some cases, depending on the brand you're using. And basically once it's on there, it isn't coming off. So why they decided to put it into a starter kits, I have no idea, you know, because it's not doing you any favours if you can't correct your mistakes, is it? Which is one thing you do need to do if you're a beginner. Non-staining pigments sit more on the top of the paper, which means they can be removed much more easily just by re-wetting the paper, basically using a damp brush or a sponge to lift the paint, or you can use a spray gun as well if you like. Now, if all this sounds a little bit confusing, don't worry, you'll find your feet fairly quickly with this. Most manufacturers include all of this information in the colour charts and on the tubes in some cases, so it's just worth checking these things out before you start, so you don't line yourself up any nasty surprises later on when you find, oh, that colour that I just put in the sky is a granulating colour, oh, now my sky looks rubbish. You get the idea, don't you? Just get to know your colours properly. The main thing to do is to go out, try a few colours, you know, see what they do, settle on half a dozen, and then get to painting. You know, just get on with it. You can always revise your choices later, can't you? The important thing is just to start painting, and there's only one way that you're going to find out what works best for you, and that's by getting on with it, rather than spending too much time on the theory. So, you know, while all this stuff is interesting, don't get too hung up on it. Right, I will see you in the next video, okay? See you later.